UFC Fight Night, Calvin Kattar versus Arnold Allen. Welcome to a UFC prediction video by yours truly here at Boxing MMA Picks. Of course, he goes by Zan, I go by Harris, and here at Boxing MMA Picks, as usual, fight by fight breakdown, fight by fight analysis. From that betting perspective specifically, we want to let you know which fights are worth the value, which fights to avoid, which underdog has the best shot at winning, and some parlay action toward the end of the video as well. Make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video. Make sure you share it with whoever needs to hear this opinion, and make sure you subscribe to the channel here at Boxing MMA Picks. We definitely appreciate that. And most importantly, we want to hear from you in the comments. For this UFC Fight Night occurring at the UFC Apex, we have a total of 11 fights, 5 of them on the main card, 6 of them on the prelims, and that's where we are going to get started. Let's start with fight number 1 of our prelims. We have Christian Rodriguez taking on Joshua Weems. Now, for this fight, Joshua Weems is coming in as a short notice. He's replacing Christian Rodriguez's original opponent, who was supposed to be Garrett Armfield. Joshua Weems is on a 2-fight win streak. He's making his UFC debut, although he did compete in Dana White Contender Series. He last competed in general back in June. Decent striker, kind of fights from the outside, lacks some technique, lacks some control as well. I think is a bit defensive with the striking, doesn't really give the highest pace, not really much of a counter puncher either, doesn't really throw combinations, kind of just throws in 1 punch at a time, I should say. But he does have a ground game. You look at his record, 10 wins, 2 losses, 9 of them are via submission, and has a decent takedown to go along with it. Christian Rodriguez, on the other hand, he lost to Jonathan Pierce in his February debut. 24 years old, so still a very young fighter. He has good hands. He's going to stand in front of you and exchange shots, good consistent pressure, primarily hands in the stand-up, so don't really expect too many kicks out of him. He can string together combinations as well. We saw him, of course, in his UFC debut take on a relentless takedown artist in Jonathan Pierce. He was taken down 6 times in that fight, but I don't think his takedown defense looked horrible by any means. He showed decent scrambling, decent balance, showed some submission attempts on the ground. So basically, I mean, he's shown me, even outside of the UFC, that he does have some ground IQ. He has a few submission wins as well to his record. But again, his debut showed that he can be taken down. 60% takedown defense on paper, but that doesn't really matter because it is such a small sample size. In terms of prediction, I am going to go with Christian Rodriguez on this one. Main reason for that, it's a short notice fight for Joshua Weems. I think Rodriguez has the better striking. Joshua Weems might have the better ground game, but I wouldn't really consider Weems to be a strong wrestler. So to that point, like I said, although Rodriguez was taken down by Jonathan Pierce in this last fight, I do think Rodriguez's takedown defense is good enough to be able to keep the fight on the feet. In some ways, I think about Joshua Weems' Dana White Contender Series fight where he lost to Fernie Garcia. He couldn't get him down. He fought from the outside, like I mentioned. He kind of threw one strike at a time. And Fernie Garcia was just the better striker until he finished him. I can see something similar happening in this fight. What would make the fight unpredictable, of course, is that it's a low-level fight. Christian Rodriguez is a fairly young fighter, so I'm not going to rush to throw this on a parlay. But in terms of making a pick, analytically, I'm liking Christian Rodriguez in this spot.
Yeah, this is a good fight to start the card with. I think Christian Rodriguez is a clear pick to get the victory here. His last fight against Jonathan Pierce, you got to remember, that was a short notice fight for Christian Rodriguez, and he moved up a weight class to 145 in that fight. There were some good things in that fight. Yeah, he got taken down by a really good grappler, Jonathan Pierce. But when you look at that fight, Rodriguez had cardio in that 3rd round. He was still going. He fought a guy that was much bigger than him, that didn't want to have anything to do with the stand-up. In the 3rd round, Rodriguez was really putting it on Pierce. And even the fights before the Pierce fight, Rodriguez kind of looks special. He looks like a really slick striker. In this fight, Weems, I don't think he's going to get it to the mat. Weems has really questionable opposition as far as who he has beaten. And I don't think he has anything to offer Rodriguez, man. I think that Weems can try his best to get it to the mat. That's his path to win the fight, is to get the grappling going. But Rodriguez is no slouch in that area as well. So I see this fight staying on the feet. I see eventually Rodriguez overwhelming Weems, maybe get a finish in this spot. But I definitely like Rodriguez here. I like his chances to get the win in this spot.
Second fight of our prelims, Cody Durden versus Carlos Mota. Cody Durden knocked out JP Bays back in June. Decent on the feet. He is introduced as a striker. Wouldn't really consider him to be a high level striker by any means. But calf kicks are looking pretty good lately. Picks his shots pretty well as well. He has a decent pace and decent pressure that you're going to see from him, especially early in fights. His movement is starting to look a little bit cleaner, a little bit better, a little bit more IQ. And again, going back to that pace and that pressure, he's going to use that to wrestle, to resort to that wrestling. He has solid wrestling. You look at the numbers there, 4 takedowns per fight, about 40% accuracy. Likes that single leg takedown, good shots for takedowns, and has that chain wrestling to go along with it. So even if he's unsuccessful that first time, he's going to stay on your back. He's going to stay in that clinch position. He's going to sort of chain it together as often as he needs to until he can kind of land it. I don't think his striking defense is the best. His cardio might also be a little bit questionable with how high of a pace he puts on as well. So, an improving fighter, but definitely still holes in his game. And he's taking on Carlos Mota, who is a replacement opponent for Kletzen Rodriguez, who is supposed to be Cody Durden's original opponent. So this will also be a short notice fight for Carlos Mota. Carlos Mota is also making his UFC debut. He competed in LFA back in August. Half of his wins, you see his record, they're 8-1. Half of them are via KO, TKO, including his last 2 fights. So definitely got to respect the power. He's introduced as a boxer and a jiu-jitsu practitioner. That's going to let you know who he is from a skill set perspective. To that point, he is a good striker, likes to press forward, has decent in and out movement to go along with it as well, especially good lead hand. I like his jab. I like that lead uppercut. I like the uppercut to the body. It's that work he does with his lead hand, which I'm really impressed by. For interestingly enough, Carlos Mota, I believe, is the favorite in this fight, if I'm not mistaken. And I do understand why. He has the better striking, the cleaner striking, has legitimately dangerous striking against a fighter in Cody Durden who doesn't really have the best striking defense, as I mentioned. But I'm going to side with Cody Durden here, and the reason for that, again, has to do with the short notice. Cody Durden's coming off of a full training camp, along with that relentless pace that he puts on, along with that wrestling approach that he puts on. That could work in his favor. Yes, Carlos Mota fought 2 months ago, but that could be kind of that sweet spot of you maybe getting back to bad dieting habits, or you taking some time off of training. So I wonder what the status has been with Carlos Mota. I'm just unfamiliar with what it has been. I would say, kind of like any other time, I would go with Carlos Mota in this. If this was the second fight in the UFC, if these guys had fought in the past, if this was a different promotion, I think almost any other time I would go with Carlos Mota. But I think about UFC debut and how that usually does not go in fighters' favors. I think about the short notice. I think about the pace that Cody Durden could put on, and it's making me lean toward the underdog, Cody Durden. So Cody Durden is going to be my pick, but should be a close one.
Well, actually, they're both coming in on short notice in this spot because Clayton Rodriguez was scheduled to fight Vinicius Salvador, and then he came out, and then Cody Durden came in to replace Vinicius, and then obviously Clayton came out. So then they brought in this new guy to face Cody. So they actually are both they both did not have a training camp. They're both coming in on short notice in this spot. Interesting as well is that Cody Durden was almost 2-1, a little under 2-1 favorite when it opened up against Mota, and now Mota is a slight favorite, right? So it's a tough fight, man. I was going back and forth. There's red flags on both sides. On the Cody Durden side, I'm kind of concerned with his cardio. He has shown that he can go out there in the first round, get the takedowns, really dictate the pace. But as the fight goes on, takedowns are harder. And when you look at Mota, he doesn't have the best competition as far as who he's fought. So I was going back and forth. So I landed on Mota because I think that I've seen him. He has shown me better cardio. And I think this fight could come down to who has the better cardio Because after that first round, Mota can also has good get-ups as well. After that first round, I don't think Durden's going to be able to get the takedowns. And I think at that point, Mota's going to kind of run away with the second and third round. 29-28 type of fight, split decision type of fight that can go either way. But I'm going to lean on the Mota side, better striker. I think he's going to be in better shape. I think he's going to have the better cardio. Again, questionable opposition on his end, but again, he's in Brazil, so these guys can fight, man. So I'm going to go Carlos Mota to win in his debut.
Important distinction there with the short notice on both sides. So listeners, make sure you are paying attention to that. I can definitely see the reason for going with Carlos Mota on that. Let's move on to the third fight of our prelims. We have Chase Hooper taking on Steve Garcia. Chase Hooper, good win over Felipe Colares back in May. He's a southpaw on the feet, not really the best stand-up, kind of leaves the chin up, a little bit slow, a little bit chinny as well. But it is something that he's actively working on. Still very young, of course, as well. I know he was doing some work with Wonderboy Thompson for his last fight. Not sure if that's continuing or not, but nonetheless important to mention. His striking defense, not the best, as I mentioned, just going back to his sort of inability on the feet. But unsurprisingly, expect a grapple heavy attack out of him. You know, he's comfortable grappling off of his back. He's comfortable in kind of like really heavy scrambling situations. As long as he's on the ground, he feels okay. Good scrambler, good at throwing up submission attempts, good at reversing positions as well. And again, in terms of his ground work, more so of a grappler as opposed to a wrestler, but showed decent takedown ability as well in his last fight. Again, very tricky, very crafty. He was able to show that pretty well as well in his last fight. And also has great cardio, you know, definitely an improving fighter. And I think really impressed a lot of people in his last fight with the control that he had. Steve Garcia, on the other hand, lost his last fight to Mahashate back in June. He's a southpaw as well. Solid hands. He's light on the feet. The jab is solid. He can definitely put combinations together and not afraid to engage. He can also be a bit chinny, and he does have a bit of a ground game. Almost 2 takedowns per fight, almost 50%. He's landed a few takedowns in 2 of his 3 UFC fights to this point. So he has kind of shown that he has at least a little bit of that in him. Steve Garcia, definitely the better striker in this situation. I think he can have a big striking advantage over Chase Hooper here. It's also important to note that Chase Hooper is moving up in weight, 145 to 155. That size difference, it could be significant in terms of his ability to bring the fight to the ground, in terms of his ability to scramble or control or use the grappling to his advantage. But I mean, ultimately, Steve Garcia is super live in this fight, especially for as big of an underdog as he is. I think he can hurt Chase Hooper on the feet, but I'm going to sort of trust Hooper's improvement here. Really impressed me in his last fight. He could just be growing into his body regarding the new weight class. And again, I think he finds crafty. I think he can find, I should say, a crafty way to get this fight to the mat. And I think a submission victory for Hooper is very possible in this one. So I'm going with Chase Hooper. I think it's going to be kind of ugly, a lot of scrambling. He's going to do his thing on the ground, and he's going to get sort of a 29-28 in his favor. But I think he's way too big of a favorite to bet on. So I'm not interested in that. But I will be making the pick for Chase Hooper.
Yeah, Felipe Colares versus Chase Hooper. That was a good fight for Hooper. He looked really good in that fight. He looked stronger. He looked like, as you mentioned, he's growing into his body. But I can't go with Chase Hooper, man. I just can't do it. Like, I don't know if I'm a hater, but I just think that he's not strong enough, right? It's a matter of, I think Garcia can stuff a couple takedowns and knock him out. But Garcia, again, has really sketchy, a really sketchy ground game. Against Luis Pena, Pena was able to dominate, have him on the mat almost the entire fight in each round. And again, Chase Hooper just needs 1 takedown, 2 takedowns, get that rear naked choke. It could be that simple. But I can't put a bet on this guy, man. He's probably going to win this fight. But again, I'm a hater. I'm going to go with Steve Garcia, keeping this on the feet and knocking him out, man. So I'm going to go Steve Garcia to pull off the upset.
Fight number 4, we have Joseph Holmes versus Jung Park. Joseph Holmes beat Alan Amadovsky back in May. Decent striker. He has a decent long jab. fights from range. He's going to have a significant reach advantage in this fight. We see the difference there, 7 inches. Also, about a 6 inch height advantage as well. So definitely would be the physically bigger fighter. He's not afraid to play that clinch game against the cage. It's going to lead to a takedown attempt or two. 3 UFC appearances, almost 2 takedowns per fight. So again, just speaking to that ability and willingness to revert to the clinch game, to attempt takedowns in those positions. I wouldn't really identify him as a grappler or a wrestler by any means, though. He's gonna kind of rely on his striking, where again, kind of average in my opinion, not really the best, but not bad by any means. Jung Young Park, on the other hand, he had a split decision win over Eric Anders back in May. He's primarily a boxer. He's actually introduced as a boxer as well. And he's a very patient striker. I think that's probably the biggest MO from him. He has a good jab, good timing as a counter puncher. That said, doesn't really initiate the offense that goes against him, but he does have high striking IQ, has good distance control as well. In terms of the diversity of his game, he has a respectable 2 takedowns per fight at 55% accuracy, and that's in a 6 UFC fight size sample, so pretty valid at that point. Also, a respectable 70% takedown defense, despite giving up 3 takedowns in his last fight. Even with being taken down, he's shown an ability to work his way back up, so I'm not too worried about him there. I also like his consistent pace. He has good cardio, doesn't really slow down. The way that he looks in the first minute is kind of the way that he looks in the final minute as well. I feel pretty comfortable siding with Jung Young Park for this fight, and that's for a few reasons. I think, for one, Jung Young Park is the cleaner, more technical, and in my opinion, more high level striker, at least with the boxing specifically. Reason number two, I think about the cardio. Joseph Holmes' pace will definitely slow down as the fight goes on. And it's not really the highest pace to begin with. So I can see Jung Young Park's consistency and cardio kicking into the later rounds. And I also think about experience, right? Jung Young Park has some decent wins in the UFC, whereas you see Holmes kind of going tit for tat, leading to a loss versus a fighter like Jamie Pickett, who isn't really the highest level fighter in his own right. So, for those reasons, I like Jung Young Park. Should have this fight his way, should be able to keep it on the feet, should be, better overall on the feet. Jung Young Park is going to be my pick.
Yeah, the thing is, Joseph Holmes, I've never been impressed with this guy. He looked pretty good on the Contender Series, but again, he looks very green. In this fight, he only has the height, the height, the reach. Those are his only things he's bringing to this fight that benefit him here. He has a lower level of competition as far as who he's fought. Jung Young Park's going to come in here, take him down. Holmes has a 37% takedown defense against lower level UFC guys. You got to think Park's going to be able to exploit that. And a bigger thing is Holmes has cardio issues. He gasses out. So after that first round, if he doesn't get the finish, Park's going to win the next 2 rounds for sure. So I like Jung Young Park here to get this one done, mix in the boxing with the wrestling. 37% takedown defense. So obviously Holmes is not doing anything to avoid the takedown. And I just see Jung Young Park having a good fight here. So I'm going to take Park to get the win here.
Fight number 5, we have Andrei Arlovski versus Marcos Rogério de Lima. Andrei Arlovski, 4-fight win streak, 2 split decision wins in a row now at this point. He beat Jake Collier back in April. Questionable decision, but decision nonetheless. He's patient in the stand-up, keeps distance pretty effectively. Solid MMA striker, has solid MMA boxing at this point. Good combinations with his hands. He can switch stance pretty effectively as well. High IQ, of course, at his age. 3-round cardio is not a problem for him. Always got to make mention of his age when he fights. 43 years old, but he keeps finding ways to win. Marcos Rogério de Lima, unanimous decision loss to Blagoy Ivanov. That was back in May. A little disappointing there. You thought he would perform better. He's introduced as a striker, has very explosive hands, good kicks as well. He unloads combinations very early in the fight. Very dangerous, early fight threat for anyone. He has a solid clinch, really good power. He can also land takedowns, about 1 takedown per fight, 50% accuracy. He can keep guys down. He can stay in control on top. decent ground and pound to go with it. But of course, like many heavyweights, but also like many explosive fighters, cardio is definitely a concern of his. I'm gonna keep it short. I like Andrei Arlovski as the underdog here, especially as the underdog. I thought this would be maybe more of a pick 'em. I think De Lima, had problems figuring out his last opponent in Blagoy Ivanov, who was coming off of a 2-year layoff at that time. And it's not really the fight, but more so how the fight went. In that fight, Ivanov effectively fought at range early in the fight. That was able to negate a lot of De Lima's explosiveness. Yes, Ivanov was able to effectively use that clinch against the cage, whereas Andrei Arlovski maybe might not be able to do that as much. But again, it was that range fighting, limiting the explosiveness, and just really wearing on De Lima's cardio by making the fight last as long as possible. That really worked in Ivanov's favor here. For that fight, I should say. After Ivanov was kind of able to weather that early threat, he was able to consistently pressure De Lima using striking of zone. So that's where, again, I feel like Andrei Arlovski, I can see a similar outcome here, especially with Arlovski being a better striker than what Ivanov was for that fight. So again, I'm looking at similarities as to what could happen, or Marcos Rogério de Lima can be super explosive in the first couple minutes and knock Arlovski out. Obviously, that heavyweight beware is still very much on this fight, I should say. But Arlovski has shown me the ability to keep it at range, stay patient, avoid the early threat, make these fights last, and somehow get it in his favor. I think this one will be a little bit easier to get in his favor if he avoids that round one threat. So I'm going with Andrei Arlovski. I think he's going to get it done again. I think he'll be on a 5-fight win streak at this point.
Yeah, I don't believe so. I think this is it, man. I think he's gonna meet his match. The Jake Collier match. That was probably a bigger robbery than the Yan versus O'Malley. Like the Jake Collier, like there's no way that guy lost that fight. But the judges went to the went Arlovski. They said he won that fight. And you look at he fought Jared Vanderaa, split decision, Carlos Felipe, Chase Sherman. These are guys that can't really do much as far as mixing in the other aspects of the MMA game. They're kind of one-dimensional. Arlovski is able to kind of dance around the ring and outpoint them. I think Rogério gives them bigger problems here, having that heavy power, the ability to knock him out. He's showing that he's able to go 3 rounds. He's implementing more of the wrestling. I think this is a spot Lima can catch Arlovski. I think Lima's going to win this fight. Again, this is close. Can go either way. And again, if it goes to decision, the judges might give Arlovski the win, even though he loses 2 or 3 rounds. But I think the Lima gets it done, man. He's been looking pretty good lately. Even in his loss versus Blagoy Ivanov, that was close. And Ivanov is a legit fighter. So I'm gonna go Rogério here to pull it out here, get the win, maybe get the knockout. But I think he has more right now than Arlovski. So I gotta go with him to get the win here.
And final fight of our prelims, in that case, we have Phil Hawes versus Roman Dolidze. Phil Hawes beat Duran Win back in June. Scary power, cut the ring off well, almost has that stalking type of style, but also a very effective jab. Solid movement, doesn't really force the issue at all at this point. He throws a lot of fakes and feints to set up his punches, uses level changes. He, of course, shows off his wrestling as well. He has decent combinations, has good striking IQ, pretty strong clinch against the cage as well. Again, just going back to that wrestling background. And to mention the point of wrestling again, he has good takedowns. He has good takedown defense. He has solid top control, solid ground and pound, legitimate wrestler in Phil Hawes, in addition to the striking that he has. Roman Dolidze, you can say some similar things about him. He's on a 2-fight winning streak. He beat Kyle Dawkins back in June as well. I think that was actually on the same card. Smothering wrestling approach. Always got to mention that he's a world grappling champion, a European grappling champion as well. So in addition to the wrestling, he has the grappling to match it. We've questioned his IQ and his cardio tank in the past, but it's things that he's kind of improving. Stand-up is still fairly basic. He is becoming a bit more composed, a bit better IQ, playing to his strengths a bit more. Despite the stand-up being fairly basic, we know that he has really good power, though. right? Half of his wins, half of his 10 wins are via KO TKO, including his last fight. We saw him drop Kyle Dawkins without much of a windup before that stoppage. The common opponent is Kyle Dawkins amongst these two. They both have wins in that situation. Roman Dolidze's was more impressive. I think Roman Dolidze is definitely live as a dog here. Again, the power, it can really make a difference. Think about the way that Chris Curtis was able to rock Phil Hawes, for example. Hawes also subsequently lost a grappling match to Andrei Petroski the following month. In terms of his last fight, I'd put Dolidze at a higher grappling level than Andrei Petroski. So that kind of tells you what could happen there despite the wrestling that Phil Hawes has. That said, this is an MMA fight. This is not a grappling match. So I feel that Phil Hawes is more talented overall, and especially in very key areas. I look at 100% takedown defense thus far in 7 UFC fights, and I think about Dolidze's ability to take him down and Phil Hawes' ability to fight those off. We know that Phil Hawes has great power in his own right. 12 professional wins, 8 of them are via KO TKO. Legitimate takedown ability and wrestling ability, I mentioned that already. But another point to mention is that Roman Dolidze has 37% takedown defense. So that tells me that Hawes will be able to resort to that when and if he chooses. And in general, I think Phil Hawes' striking is just significantly better, if you ask me. Again, Dolidze is very live as a dog, so I want to make sure I mention that. But if this fight goes the way that it should, I can see Phil Hawes cruising on points here. So Phil Hawes is going to be my. I feel pretty comfortable with it. I know the risk of Dolidze potentially knocking him out, but I'm going to roll the dice there, and I'm going to go with Phil Hawes.
Yeah, this is it's a good fight here, but I think Phil Hawes gets it done. But the thing is, he's going to be winning the fight the majority. If he loses the fight, he's going to be winning the fight, and then he gets knocked out. His chin is very sketchy. He's been knocked out. He's been flattened. And Dolidze is a big guy that can hit hard. Dolidze is going to be the bigger guy in the fight when they meet up. Dolidze has the grappling advantage. If Dolidze can get on top, he can do some damage. If Dolidze can get a leg lock, he can do some damage. So I think it's better for Hawes to kind of keep it on the feet, sprawl and brawl type of style. He has shown that he has the better striking, the better boxing. It looks like he's focusing a lot on the boxing right now. And I think in this fight, I think he gets it done, man. I think Phil Hawes is going to be a little too clean for Dolidze, but Dolidze just needs one punch to kind of change the outcome here. So, but I'm going to go Phil Hawes to get it done, but I'm not confident by any means. I think this is a really close fight because I think Dolidze just needs one of those Dolidze bombs and he can win the fight. But I'm going to bank on Phil Hawes moving around, using his footwork, hands up high, and jab him, outbox him in this match. So I'm going to go Hawes to win the fight.
Finishing the prelims, let's get started with the main card. Fight number 1. We have Dustin Jacoby versus Khalil. Rountree. Dustin Jacoby's on a 4-fight win streak, as well as an impressive 9-fight unbeaten streak after beating Dawoon Jung back in July. He's a complete methodical striker, pretty good boxer, pretty good kickboxer. He's going to chip away with the kicks, really great accuracy with the hands as well. Good movement, good counter punching as well. His calf kick specifically has given a lot of opponents problems, so look for him to potentially use that approach. And 11 of his 18 wins are via KO TKO, including his last fight. But it's more of an accuracy, accumulation, speed type of thing as opposed to brute force or one-shot KO power. Khalil Rountree, on the other hand, 2-fight win streak. He beat Carl Roberson back in March. He's looked really dangerous in his past few fights. Almost like he's had a renewed focus in some ways. He is a southpaw, Muay Thai stance, quick, heavy, explosive striker, really good technically as well with the striking. He implements a calf kick game plan in his own right, at least in his last couple of fights, not including his most recent fight, but didn't really need it. He's dangerous in the first round for anyone. He's going to put on good pressure. In addition to that explosiveness, in addition to that power, he can definitely be taken down, though. He can definitely be controlled against the cage as well. Opponents have had a path to victory using that, although I don't anticipate that mattering for this fight. I think this fight will stay on the feet. And we know that a big concern for Khalil Rountree has been his cardio tank. Again, just going back to that renewed focus, Looks like he's starting to pace himself a little bit better, but always an asterisk to note beside his name. Never a good idea really betting against Khalil Rountree. When he's on, I think he's as dangerous as anyone. But I like Dustin Jacoby here for a few reasons. I think he'll fare well on the feet. I don't think he'll be intimidated by Rountree. I mean, he is a kickboxer. He did rank pretty high in Glory Kickboxing in his time there. Um, and in general, I think his boxing is also better. I think the accuracy, I think he can use the jab in particular to his advantage to keep it at range, to kind of keep that explosiveness away from him. They both have dangerous calf kick games, so going to be interesting to see who's able to implement theirs. And also, I'm going to trust Dustin Jacoby as the fight goes on, as opposed to Khalil Rountree, who is somebody who has faded badly in the past. So very dangerous fight. Again, I'm not going to bet on this one, even though I like betting on Dustin Jacoby more times than not. I'm going to avoid betting on this one completely. But in terms of making a pick, kind of sticking with my guns. I like picking Dustin Jacoby. He's given me all reason to, and he's given me no reason to bet against him on this one. So I'm gonna go Dustin Jacoby, weather the early storm, get the win.
Okay, now you gotta like Jacoby's strikes landed per minute in this spot compared to Khalil's kind of more patient, right? So Jacoby's gonna be the more active guy. However, if Khalil comes in like he looked in that Carl Roberson fight, he was really impressive in that fight. So that's the thing about picking Khalil Rountree fights. You're not sure who's going to come to the ring. Again, he has the ability to win this fight and win it in an impressive fashion. He definitely has that skill in him. But again, it's a matter of which Rountree is going to get to the octagon. I'm going to go with Jacoby ever so slightly in this spot. These guys are both strikers, both kickboxers, high level. It's going to be about who hurts who and who can finish who, right? So it could be it could come down to who lands that big shot first. And this is a really tough fight. If you watch kickboxing fights, you know that in kickboxing fights, a guy could fight a guy this week, then fight him again four months later, and it's one knocks him out here, then the other guy knocks him out there. Kickboxing is really a tit for tat thing where anyone can get knocked out on any given night. It's who lands that bomb. Even though one guy can look better, it's just stand up. The other guy just needs one shot and knocks him out. If you look at the fight this weekend, Overeem versus Badir Hari happened a week or two ago. Overeem finished him in that fight. But Badir Hari, even though he's old, is a more skilled kickboxer. But again, he got finished against Overeem. He just took one shot. That's what it comes down to when kickboxers meet up in the octagon or in a kickboxing ring. These guys hit hard, especially at light heavyweight. So I can't feel confident on either side. No one's gonna come in here and make it look easy. They're both gonna be in danger at some points in the fight. But I'm gonna go with Jacoby, just having a bit more tools in the striking area. I think he's better defensively. He can kind of check those leg kicks. But again, it's close, right? It can go either way. But I'm gonna go Dustin Jacoby to get it done.
Moving on to our second fight of the main card, we have Josh Fremd versus Tresean Gore. For Fremd, lost his debut to Anthony Hernandez in April. That was a short notice fight for him. Decent jab, likes to come forward, picks his shots pretty well, has decent timing, a little bit more technical on the feet, a bit one-dimensional otherwise. He has 3 rear naked chokes to his name amongst his 9 wins, but he's pretty much going to rely on his striking to get him his wins. Tresean Gore, on the other hand, 2-fight losing streak after being finished in round 1 by Cody Brundage. He's introduced as having a Muay Thai and boxing background, stalks his opponents down control center, good patience early in the fight, good jab, good power as well, pretty explosive, good striking speed. Not really an active enough striker though. He's shown wrestling on the regional scene, but hasn't really translated to the UFC outside of showing decent takedown defense. And I mean, the verdict is still out on Tresean Gore. In a lot of ways, he just might not be UFC level, right? You see that very little professional experience, made his rounds through Ultimate Fighter, but when it counts, racking up losses. So the verdict is still out on him. This fight was supposed to happen 3 months ago, but Josh Fremd withdrew. I think Tresean Gore will get cut here if he loses again. So that makes you wonder what impact that will have on his mentality as well as his game plan. I do think both fighters are going to get the style of fight that they want. I think they'll both be in each other's faces. I think that this fight probably ends in the first or second round on either side. Both guys have that knockout power. Both guys can be knocked out. I do think it's a flip a coin type of fight, but my coin is going to land on Tresean Gore to pull out the win here. I think he can use Josh Fremd's forward pressure to his advantage. I think Gore is the more patient striker of the two, and I can see that translating to a knockout victory for Tresean Gore. That said, definitely don't want to bet this. Definitely would not advise anyone to bet on this on either side. But Tresean Gore is going to be my pick.
Yeah, this is a sketchy fight. We know Tresean Gore went through the Ultimate Fighter with a high ceiling. He kind of ran through the show, lost in the finals to Battle, but he was the favorite going into that fight. And on the show, he looked really good. He looked really sharp with his striking, looked strong at the hips, able to keep the fight up, and he's knocking these guys out. But his experience level is pretty low. Let's be honest. He hasn't fought many times. But I think he has the boxing. I think he has the advantage in the striking as far as the hands go. But I just think Josh Fremd has a more overall game. I think the biggest thing on Josh's side is going to be the cardio. I think as the fight goes on, Josh is going to find success as the fight goes on. And I also think Josh has a better ground game than Tresean Gore. So again, yeah, this is close. Can go either way. Again, one of those fights, who lands first. I don't think the other one's going to be able to recover. So I think it's going to be one of those fights. And I think that Josh is going to land. He has that reach advantage in this fight. Pretty technical fighter. He's not the best. He has a low ceiling. But I think at this point in time, he's fought the better guys. And I think he's going to be more ready, more well-equipped than Tresean Gore is come fight night. So I'm going to go Josh Fremd. Again, I'm not impressed with this guy, though. But I just think that I just can't trust Tresean Gore's chin. He got knocked out of the last fight, and I think Josh can do the same. So Josh is my pick in this spot.
Fight number 3 of our main card, Waldo Cortes-Acosta versus Jared Vanderaa. For Cortes-Acosta, he's an undefeated newcomer, 7-0. He's competed in LFA. He's competed in Bellator. In addition to his most recent win on the Dana White Contender Series back in August, he's a former boxer. He was just 6-4 as a boxer. So maybe MMA more of his calling. Has a good jab, uses it really well to control distance, to control pace, as well as to set up combinations and stop the attack of his opponents. He is going to be pretty much doing all boxing, though. Don't expect really any kicks out of him. He can land solid combinations, again, back to the point of the boxing. Doesn't really swing wildly, doesn't really waste punches. He's been controlled with that sort of clinch takedown approach. So number one, that does tell you a path to victories beating him. But what's pretty impressive, again, we see his record 7-0 for a reason. He's shown the ability even in round 3, where he's getting controlled in round 1, where he's getting controlled in round 2, where he's getting controlled for the majority of round 3. He can still make his way back up, still string combinations together, and still land a knockout. So very resilient, has that heart to want to continue winning even as the fight ends. Jared Vanderaa, 4 losses in a row now at this point. Lost to Chase Sherman back in July. Bit slow, sturdy, very hittable. Definitely has a chin, though. He has that toughness factor to him. Looks better with the movement, continues to come forward and stalk. The striking does look improved. He does have a better jab. He does have somewhat regular usage of a calf kick. He does look improved as a counter striker as well. And, he's not afraid to make it dirty against the cage if needed. Doesn't really have the takedowns to go with it in terms of the takedown numbers. Terrible takedown defense as well. But again, not afraid to kind of mix it up and make it dirty. Vanderaa in some ways, I mean, he's kind of become the heavyweight Sam Alvey at this point, I think. It's still a heavyweight fight, still heavyweight beware, still anything can happen. But especially if Vanderaa can land a takedown somehow, he's big enough to lay and pray, and swing rounds in his favor again. We've seen that Waldo Cortes-Acosta just doesn't really have that ground game, but Vanderaa just doesn't have that ability in him to resort to that kind of game. And I think this could be a pretty good showcase for Waldo Cortes-Acosta. He should be able to shine on the feet. A finish wouldn't surprise me. I think it'll more so be from an accumulation of punches as opposed to one big knockout punch. But nonetheless, I'm going with the newcomer, Waldo Cortes-Acosta.
Yeah, this is a really sketchy fight. Real sketchy. Because Acosta can come out there and knock him out, right? And he has shown that he has power to do that. But Vanderaa has shown that he's a big guy. He can take some of these shots. Yes, he got knocked out against, was it Chase Sherman in the third round? Yeah, he got knocked out, but he was taking some bombs in that fight. And he was actually, I believe he was winning the fight until the actual punch landed. So, but Chase Sherman is pretty low level as well. But when you look at his fight versus Harry Hunsucker, another really low level guy, he somehow got the fight to the mat on the Contender Series. And laid on top of him and just pounded him out till the ref stopped the fight. If you this is a tough one, man. If he could somehow trip Acosta or somehow Acosta falls down or he takes him down somehow, he can cause problems in this fight. If he gets him down, he's gonna gas out Acosta and with his size being on top of him. And it's a tough fight, man, because Acosta can knock him out, but again, he has no ground game, no takedown defense. If Vanderaa gets him to the mat, being the more well-rounded guy, it's a sketchy fight, right? So years ago, I'd say Acosta's gonna win for sure, put the house on it. But obviously, my experience now with these UFC fights, when these guys have a glaring hole in their game, a lot of times it gets exposed at this level. So yeah, it's a tough fight going back and forth, but I can't go Vanderaa, man. This guy's on a 4-fight losing streak. I think Acosta's gonna land that bomb, but no confidence by any means. I've been here before, right? So newcomer coming into the UFC, heavy hands, glaring ground game hole in his game, fighting another fighter that's pretty basic everywhere, but has some ground, wins the fight. But I don't know if that's going to be the case here. But I'm going to go with Acosta to get it done. But be careful here. This is a sketchy fight.
Let's move on to our co-main event. In that case, we have Tim Means versus Max Griffin. Tim Means lost to Kevin Holland back in June. Good striking, good consistent pressure. He's a solid counterpuncher as well in those boxing exchanges. He likes those clinch situations against the cage. Look for him to use dirty boxing in those situations. Definitely going to attempt that double leg takedown as well. The takedown numbers don't really suggest anything substantial, just one takedown per fight. But he did land 2 takedowns in his last fight versus Kevin Holland. So that tells you that it's still a part of his game, even though he's not, a strong chain wrestler by any means. Not the best striking defense. I mean, he will take a hit. He is prone to leg kicks. I've also seen him get taken down fairly easily as well. On paper, he's just 66% takedown defense. But Tim Means, I mean, he's always a tough fight, right? He's a veteran. We see his record there, 32-13, almost 50 professional fights at this point. So he's a veteran. He's definitely seen it all. He's going up against Max Griffin, who had a split decision loss to Neil Magny back in March. Decent stand-up, improved stand-up. He moves pretty decently around the cage. A lot of change of direction, a lot of in and out movement. He'll jab effectively at this point, going to effectively use that calf kick as well. That's something he started to implement into his game. He's looked more technically sound on the feet in his last couple of fights. Striking still lacks technique overall, I would say. Still kind of average at best in terms of his striking, but he is moving at all times, and that is a really good thing. That does work in his favor. Cardio does not seem to be a problem with him at all. He can press forward, he can initiate, and we know that ultimately he's a wrestler first. Despite only 1 takedown landed in his last 4 fights, which I thought was really interesting stat. But nonetheless, when he does want it, he has good takedowns, he has good top control, good takedown defense as well. And I'll keep the prediction part of it short. I like Max Griffin in this fight. He's 36 years old. Tim Means is 38 years old, but despite Max Griffin being 36 years old, I think you mentioned it maybe 2 fights ago for Max Griffin. He could be one of those fighters that are just coming into his prime later on in his career. I do still believe he's getting better as a fighter. I think he's getting smarter. I think he's finding ways to win rounds. I think he's keeping up with the stand up more. He's giving guys more problems with his movement. These are all things that I think will take effect into for this fight specifically. Also, with Tim Means not really having the best takedown defense, I can see Max Griffin capitalizing on that and really resorting to takedowns, especially that he hasn't really done so in his past couple fights. Tim Means can definitely have some moments on the feet, but even in clinch situations, which Tim Means does welcome, I feel like Max Griffin may be physically stronger amongst these two. My pick, I should say, will be for Max Griffin, but I do think this should be a close fight. So again, I'm not rushing to throw this on parlays, but I like Max Griffin's chances here.
Yeah, you got to go with Max in this fight. You got to go with Max. Let's go look at the Magny fight versus Max Griffin. Magny's high level, right? So on MMA decisions, four or five media personalities had Max Griffin winning that fight. It was close. It was a close fight, right? I wouldn't argue if you had either guy winning, right? But it was close. And Max Griffin, if he won that fight, he'd be on a 4-fight winning streak or so, right? So he's definitely getting better as he's definitely improving later in his career. Because prior to that, it was win loss kind of thing in the UFC, or loses 2 in a row, and then he went on a 3-fight streak, and then he had a really close decision with a top 10 fighter. I think he's top 10 in Neil Magny. Now he moves around light on his feet, good movement. In this fight, Max Griffin's going to be the more athletic guy as well, the stronger guy in this fight. Tim Means technically might have the better striking with his jab and his move and his placement of shots, but he's kind of heavy on his feet. He doesn't really have the footwork. So if Max Griffin kind of is going to be moving around light on his feet, he can kind of explode into takedowns. He can explode into like straights, heavy straight shots. I think this is a fight Max is going to kind of. I think this is Max's fight, man. At this time in their career, I think Max is the better guy. I think Max would have gave Holland a better fight than Tim Means would have at this point. So I'm going to go with Max Griffin. By all means, Tim Means had a better career than Max Griffin, but I think right now, I think Max Griffin being stronger, more athletic, it looks like he's improving his striking as well. He's going to have the wrestling advantage. And most importantly, again, is that athleticism, that cardio he has as well. So I'm going to go with Max Griffin having the better cardio, better activity, better pace. And I think he gets it done here, man. I'm pretty confident he wins this fight.
All right, so let's move on then to our main event of the evening. We have Calvin Kattar versus Arnold Allen. Calvin Kattar split decision loss to Josh Emmett back in June. A lot of people had Calvin Kattar winning that fight. Kind of a frustrating decision on his end. Clean, controlled pace, great technical movement, great technical punch, and he's a really good boxer. High IQ fighter. He has that continuous pace. His approach, I mean, we look at his significant strikes landed per minute. He's going to mix up the striking really well. Doesn't really have the offensive takedown numbers. He's not going to land takedowns less than half per fight, but he does have excellent takedown defense numbers at 91%. That should allow him to keep this fight on the feet. Going up against Arnold Allen, who's on an 11-fight win streak now at this point, after he made quick work of Dan Hooker back in March. He's a southpaw, good overall stand-up, good movement, good jab especially, and really good combinations. He has good MMA striking in general. He's patient on the feet, and he picks his spots really well. Fights from range, fights off that back foot a bit, so at times it kind of stops him from looking dominant, but he's a really good counterpuncher, really explosive counterpuncher, and I think his last fight was definitely all the proof that you needed in terms of that. Arnold Allen, we know his stock is rising quickly. I mean, with great reason. But I'm leaning Calvin Kattar here, right? That last fight against Dan Hooker, that was live at the O2 Arena, big UK crowd for a UK fighter. this is at the UFC Apex. This is a much different crowd. This is a smaller cage as well, right? I thought Kattar won the Emmett fight. I am in that crowd that thought he won that fight. And I think that fight showed you how Kattar would be able to handle an explosive striker and still land more shots. Not to say Arnold Allen is explosive by nature, but he can definitely become explosive when he finds those opportunities to. Kattar, we know, of course, has strength of schedule on his side as well. Kattar has also been in 5-round fights before. I don't think Arnold Allen has. I'm okay with being wrong on that, but I don't think he has. And we know Kattar is, again, a high IQ striker. Not to say Allen is not, but Kattar is. And I'm expecting a lot of stalemate on the feet between these two. But at some point, I'm expecting Kattar's experience. I'm expecting that jab, just that higher work rate to kind of pull through. And I mean, we'll see what round 4, what round 5 looks like. Is Arnold Allen ready for that moment, or is Calvin Kattar going to show that there's levels to this? I feel like we're in this situation often. We saw it happen last week. Sean O'Malley got the decision over the guy that's been here. Was it deserved? We'll have a different discussion about that. But I feel like this is going to be a situation where, yes, it could be close, but the guy that's been here before should be able to pull through. Calvin Kattar is going to be my pick. I could be proven wrong here, but I'm okay with that. Calvin Kattar is, I believe, an underdog at this point now. I know it's flipping back and forth. I know it's close to a pick 'em, but especially if Calvin Kattar is an underdog, I really like him in this spot.
Yeah, this is a fight I really probably did 50% of my studying on this, and then the rest was on the rest of the fights. Because this fight visually, this is a really this is a 50-50 fight when you base it off the visuals. Because you look at Calvin Kattar, really good boxing, really good cardio. This guy's fought the who's who, and he's looked well in these fights. Even if he lost fights, he looked good at certain points of these fights. But it was just a high level of guys he was fighting versus Arnold Allen has looked like he could be the next guy. He's not fighting the best guys though, Arnold Allen. Now he did step it up against Sodiq Yusuff. Sodiq Yusuff is a big win, in my opinion. Sodiq Yusuff is a strong, is a really tough competitor, really good striking. But when you really watch that fight against Sodiq Yusuff, I actually bet Sodiq Yusuff that night, I believe. But if you watch that fight, Sodiq Yusuff was winning the first round, outstruck him in that round, and then obviously he got dropped in that round. Same thing in the second round. He was winning the round, outstriking him, and then he gets dropped in that round by Arnold Allen. And in the third round, Arnold Allen is fully gassed out, pleading for air, and Sodiq Yusuff piled it on and clearly won that third round. But you got to think, if Sodiq Yusuff just had his hand up blocking those shots or stepped to one side, he would have won one of those rounds. It was a matter of inches, and he got caught. Arnold Allen, it shows the power that he has. It shows what he's capable of. But again, if he doesn't land those shots directly, he's losing that fight to Sodiq Yusuff. Then you got a fight against Dan Hooker, who went down in weight. He looked like a skeleton in that fight. And Dan Hooker looked really bad physically in that fight. Dan Hooker, however, dropped him at one point. Arnold Allen had him hurt. And then Hooker kind of countered, but Allen kept going. The relentlessness. He's a strong guy, man. This guy looks really good. He could win this fight. If he comes out in that first round, I think he has some of the heaviest power in that division. He might not have the knockouts to back it up, but the way he throws that left, if that connects, that could drop anybody. You know, I've never seen Sodiq Yusuff drop like that in both rounds. When I look at Calvin Kattar, though, the vet in him, he's been there, man. This guy's fought the who's who of the division. He's gonna have that jab. He doesn't really get knocked out. I'm not sure if he's been knocked out. And I think that's Arnold Allen's way to win this fight, is to drop him or knock him out, or to keep dropping him each round to win those rounds. Because when you look at the activity of these fighters, Kattar throws way more shots. He lands way more shots. So he likely is going to outwork Arnold Allen in this fight. Arnold Allen needs to kind of knock him down to sway the round back to his side or to finish him to win the fight. So it's a tough fight, man, because they both look good. But being 5 rounds, if it was 3 rounds, I'd actually would go with Arnold Allen in a 3-round fight. I think he'd win the first round, and then he'd have a chance to win one of the other 2 rounds. But being a 5-round fight, I could see Kattar winning one of those first 2 rounds, and then as the fight goes on after that 3rd round, Arnold gassing, because Kattar is going to be putting on a pressure. He's going to be throwing a lot of shots. Allen's going to have to respond. That's going to gas him out quicker, just like Sodiq Yusuff did when he kind of threw a lot of shots in the first 2 rounds. By the 3rd round, Arnold Allen didn't really have anything left. I think Kattar can avoid getting knocked down like Sodiq did. He might get knocked down once, but I don't think he's going to get knocked down twice here. And I think as it gets to that 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round, Kattar's going to run away with it with his cardio advantage. So I'm going to go Calvin Kattar to get it done. But I wouldn't be surprised if he gets finished in that 1st round. But I think as the fight goes, I think Arnold Allen needs to finish him in the first 2 rounds. If he does, then I see Kattar running away the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round at that point. So Kattar is my pick.
All right, great breakdown to finish off our main card, to finish off our event there. Let's take it to Vegas at that point, and let's take a look at some underdogs. Now, I know that all of the lines have been updated, so I'm going to skip the first 2 fights, that being the Christian Rodriguez fight as well as the Cody Durden fight. But also, in terms of underdogs from there, I'll let you know the other 9, I suppose. So Steve Garcia is an underdog versus Chase Hooper. Joseph Holmes is an underdog. Andrei Arlovski is an underdog. Roman Dolidze is an underdog. Khalil Rountree, Tresean Gore, Jared Vanderaa, Tim Means, and I'm going to call that Kattar fight a pick'em, so we can actually consider both of them underdogs because I know the lines are switching.
Yeah, I'm going with Calvin Kattar. He's the underdog right now.
Yep, that is true. Calvin Kattar is the underdog right now. So that is a valid underdog pick. I definitely agree with that. I'm going to choose a different underdog pick. But I do agree with that Calvin Kattar one. My underdog pick is going to be Andrei Arlovski. I think he can get the job done. Almost a 3-1. Could be some good money there. And in terms of favorite picks or parlay pieces, where are you taking a look at?
All right, let's go with Christian Rodriguez, Johnny Young Park, and we're going to end it off with Max Griffin.
And Max Griffin. All right. So now, again, keep in mind the Christian Rodriguez fight, not fully updated yet. He was the favorite against Garrett Armfield. I believe he's the favorite against Joshua Weems. I assume he is, at least. We'll use what the old odds are for now, but keep in mind that number could be a little bit different. Jung Young Park as well, in addition to Max Griffin, that would currently read as a 3.27, meaning that $100 will give you a total return of $327. For our bigger bettors, $250 will return a total of $819. As for my parlay pieces, I'm looking at one similar fight in Jung Young Park. I'm also looking at Phil Hawes, despite the knockout threat that Dolidze is, and I think that is a fair warning. And I'm also taking a look at Waldo Cortes-Acosta, again, despite the heavyweight beware that fight is, and despite the sort of slim chance that Vanderaa could lay and prey on in that one. So again, understanding the risks there. But nonetheless, those 3 fights, similar payout, 3.27. So $100 will give you a return of $327. For our bigger bettors, $250 will give you a return of $819. So let's officially end it off on that note. This has been UFC Fight Night, Calvin Kattar versus Arnold Allen, your full card prediction video presented by yours truly here at Boxing MMA Picks. Make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel here at Boxing MMA Picks, and most importantly, we want to hear from you in the comments. As usual, he goes by the name of Zan. I go by the name of Harris. And in our usual fashion, let's get this money.
Let's get it.